I never thought I'd be turning to Reddit for advice on something so personal, but here I am. I'm caught in a complicated situation that spans over 2 decades, and I really need some outside perspective. It involves my estranged father, and I'm torn about what to do. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Edward, 28M, and when I was 8 years old, my dad Jack, 52M, made a decision that turned our lives upside down. He left our family to pursue his career dreams in another country, leaving my mom Victoria, 50F, to raise me and my younger sister Kristen, 26F, on her own. Before all this happened, we were what I thought was a happy family. Dad worked as a software engineer for a local company, and Mom was a part-time teacher. We lived in a cozy house in the suburbs, nothing fancy but comfortable. I have fond memories of weekend barbecues in our backyard, family game nights, and Dad teaching me how to play baseball in the local park. Everything changed when Dad got a job offer from a tech startup in Silicon Valley. It was a big opportunity, a chance to work on cutting-edge technology and potentially make it big. I remember overhearing heated discussions between my parents late at night. Mom didn't want to uproot our lives, arguing that we were happy where we were. Dad insisted this was his chance to provide a better life for all of us. The day Dad sat us down to explain he was leaving is etched in my memory. He tried to make it sound exciting, talking about how he'd be working on amazing new technology and how we'd have so much more when he made it big. Mom sat quietly, her eyes red from crying. Kristen, only 6 at the time, didn't really understand what was happening. Dad promised he'd call every day, visit often, and that we'd join him in California once he got settled. He hugged us goodbye, and just like that, he was gone. I remember standing at the window, watching his taxi drive away, feeling like my world had just shattered. The first few months were the hardest. Dad called frequently at first, always full of enthusiasm about his new job and life in California. But as time went on, the calls became less frequent. His promised visits home never materialized, there was always some work emergency or important meeting he couldn't miss. Meanwhile, our life at home changed dramatically. Mom had to take on a full-time teaching position and picked up tutoring gigs on the side to make ends meet. I saw her less and less as she worked longer hours. Often, I'd come home from school to an empty house, responsible for looking after Kristen until Mom got home late in the evening. I grew up fast during those years. I learned to cook simple meals, help Kristen with her homework, and take care of household chores. It wasn't easy, but I didn't have a choice. Mom was doing her best, but she was stretched thin trying to be both mother and father to us. As the years passed, Dad's presence in our lives dwindled to almost nothing. We'd get the occasional phone call or email, usually around birthdays or holidays. He'd ask surface-level questions about school and our hobbies, but it was clear he had no real idea about our daily lives or the challenges we faced. The financial support he sent was irregular and barely made a dent in our expenses. Mom never complained, but I could see the strain on her face every time bills arrived. There were times when I overheard her on the phone with Dad, pleading for more help, but these conversations always seemed to end in argument and tears. As I entered my teenage years, my feelings towards Dad transformed from sadness to anger. I resented him for choosing his career over his family. I saw how hard Mom worked, how she sacrificed everything for us, and I couldn't understand how Dad could just abandon us like that. There were so many moments when I needed a father figure. When I made the basketball team in high school, there was no one to cheer me on from the stands. When I had my first heartbreak at 16, I had no dad to turn to for advice. When I was trying to figure out college applications and future careers, I had to rely on school counselors and internet research instead of fatherly guidance. Despite the hardships, we persevered. Mom's love and determination kept us going. She always encouraged us to focus on our education and pursue our passions, even when times were tough. Kristen and I grew closer, looking out for each other in Dad's absence. We developed a bond that went beyond typical siblings. We were each other's support system. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself. I worked hard in school, got involved in extracurricular activities, and held down part-time jobs to help Mom out. It wasn't easy balancing everything, but I was motivated to succeed, partly to prove to myself, and maybe to Dad, that I could make it without him. My hard work paid off when I earned a scholarship to a good state university. It was one of the proudest moments of my life, seeing the joy and pride on Mom's face when I got the acceptance letter. Dad sent a brief congratulatory email, but by then, his opinions meant little to me. College was a transformative experience for me. I majored in marketing, discovered a passion for digital media, and made some great friends. I also met my girlfriend, Sophia, 27F, who's been an incredible support system. She comes from a close-knit family and has been patient and understanding as I've worked through my family issues. After graduating, I landed a good job at a digital marketing agency. It was a proud moment for me and Mom. We had overcome so much together, and I felt like I was finally in a position to give back to her for all her sacrifices. I helped her pay off some old debts and treated her to a well-deserved vacation. Life was going well. I had a stable career, a loving girlfriend, and was even saving up to buy my own place. Mom had found happiness too. She had remarried a kind man named Tom, 55M, who treated her well and became a supportive stepfather to Kristen and me. Kristen was doing great too, working as a nurse and recently engaged. Then, out of the blue, after nearly 20 years of minimal contact, Dad reached out. He said he was in trouble and needed my help. According to him, his business had failed, and he was facing financial ruin. He was on the verge of homelessness and desperately needed assistance. I was shocked by this sudden reappearance and request for help. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy. After all, he was still my biological father. But a larger part felt angry and resentful. Where was he when we needed him all these years? When Mom was working herself to exhaustion? When Kristen and I were growing up without a father? Now I'm torn about what to do. On one hand, I understand that life can be unpredictable and people can face hard times. But on the other hand, I can't forget the years of abandonment and the struggles we faced because of his choices. After all these years of being absent, can I trust his intentions? Is this just an attempt to use me for his own benefit now that he's in trouble? I'm not even sure if I want to meet him. I haven't told Mom about Dad's contact yet. I'm worried about how it might affect her, especially now that she's finally found happiness with Tom. And I'm concerned about how this might impact Kristen too. I need your thoughts, Reddit. Ida, for being hesitant to help my dad in his time of need? Should I put my past feelings aside and lend a hand, or is it fair for me to prioritize my own emotions and protect myself from potential manipulation? How do I handle this situation without disrupting the peace and stability my family has finally found? Update 1. Thank you all for your responses and advice. Your perspectives gave me a lot to think about. After much deliberation, I decided to meet with my dad to hear him out. I figured I owed it to myself to at least understand the full situation before making a decision. We arranged to meet at a local coffee shop. The days leading up to the meeting were filled with anxiety. I had trouble sleeping, my mind racing with all the possible scenarios of how this encounter could go. Sophia was incredibly supportive during this time, offering a listening ear and reminding me that I didn't owe my dad anything. The day of the meeting arrived. As I walked into the coffee shop, my heart was pounding. I spotted him immediately. He was sitting in a corner booth, looking older and more worn than I remembered. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I felt like that 8-year-old boy again, watching his dad leave. We exchanged awkward greetings and got our coffees. There was a heavy silence as we sat down, neither of us quite sure how to begin. Finally, Dad started to explain his situation. Apparently, his career in Silicon Valley had been a roller coaster. He had some successes early on, working for a few startups that did well. He talked about the excitement of the tech world, the long hours, the pressure to constantly innovate. As he spoke, I could see glimpses of the ambitious man I remembered from childhood. But then things took a turn. He invested heavily in a startup that promised to be the next big thing. He was convinced it would be his big break, the success that would justify all his sacrifices. But the company failed spectacularly, taking most of Dad's savings with it. He admitted that he had lived quite lavishly during the good times, never thinking it would all come crashing down. He talked about the expensive cars, the fancy parties, the luxurious vacations, all the things we never got to experience as a family. As he spoke, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was angry. How could he enjoy such a lifestyle while we struggled? Another part felt a twisted sense of satisfaction that his grand plans had failed. And yet another part, a part I wasn't entirely comfortable with, felt a twinge of pity for this man who had lost everything. Dad went on to apologize for his absence over the years. He said he had convinced himself that providing financially was enough, that he was doing what was best for the family by pursuing his career abroad. He realized too late the damage his absence had caused. I listened quietly, trying to process everything. I wanted to lash out, to tell him how much his abandonment had hurt us. I wanted to ask him if his ambitions had been worth losing his family. But seeing him so vulnerable made it difficult to maintain my anger. As he finished his story, he made his request. He needed a place to stay while he tried to get back on his feet. He also asked for a loan to help clear some of his debts. He promised he would pay it back as soon as he could. I told him I needed time to think about it. His request was significant, and I wasn't sure I was ready to have him back in my life in such a major way. I also had concerns about how this would affect Mom and Kristen. After our meeting, I called Mom to discuss the situation. It was a difficult conversation. She was understandably upset that Dad had reached out to me for help. She reminded me of all the times he had let us down in the past and warned me to be cautious. I also spoke with Kristen. Her reaction surprised me. She was more sympathetic to Dad's plight but agreed that we needed to be careful. She suggested that if we did decide to help, it should be with clear boundaries and expectations. Over the next few days, I thought long and hard about what to do. I consulted with Sophia, who offered a balanced perspective. She pointed out that while it's natural to want to help family, I needed to protect myself emotionally and financially. I also reflected on my own feelings. The meeting had stirred up a lot of old emotions, anger, resentment, but also a confusing sense of concern for this man who was, after all, my father. I realized that part of me, a part I had suppressed for years, still yearned for a relationship with him. After much consideration, I made a decision. I called Dad and told him that while I couldn't offer him a place to stay or a large loan, I was willing to help in a limited way. I offered to pay for a month's stay at a modest extended stay hotel and to connect him with some job search resources. I made it clear that this was not an open-ended arrangement and that any further assistance would depend on his efforts to improve his situation. I also told him that if he wanted to rebuild a relationship with me and Kristen, it would take time and consistent effort on his part. Dad seemed grateful for the help, even if it wasn't everything he had hoped for. He thanked me and promised to make the most of this opportunity. As I hung up the phone, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me felt guilty for not doing more, while another part felt I was already doing too much. I hoped I had struck a balance between compassion and self-protection. I'm still unsure if I've made the right decision. This situation has opened up old wounds and created new challenges. How do I navigate this new dynamic with Dad while protecting the family I've built in his absence? How do I manage my own conflicting emotions about his return? I'll keep you updated on how things progress. Thank you again for all your support and advice. It's been incredibly helpful to have this community to turn to during this difficult time. Update 2. It's been a few months since my last update, and a lot has happened. I wanted to share how things have unfolded and get your thoughts on my current situation. After I helped Dad with the hotel stay and job resources, he seemed genuinely motivated to turn things around. He found a part-time job at a local retail store and was actively looking for better opportunities. We had weekly check-ins where he'd update me on his progress. During this time, he also made efforts to reconnect with Kristen. They had a few phone calls and even met for coffee once. Kristen reported that while it was awkward, she appreciated his attempt to make amends. About a month into this arrangement, Dad asked if we could meet again. I agreed, and we met at the same coffee shop as before. He thanked me for the help and said he had been doing a lot of thinking about his past actions. What happened next took me by surprise. Dad pulled out a small, worn notebook from his pocket. He explained that over the past month, he had been writing down memories and thoughts about our family, the good times before he left, and his regrets about leaving. He started reading some of the entries aloud. He recalled specific moments, teaching me to ride a bike, reading bedtime stories to Kristen, family picnics in the park. His voice cracked as he described the day he left and how he had convinced himself it was the right thing to do. I found myself getting emotional listening to these memories. It was strange hearing about these happy times that I had almost forgotten, overshadowed as they were by the pain of his departure. Dad then did something I never expected. He handed me the notebook and asked me to keep it. He said he wanted me to have a piece of our shared history, even if he couldn't make up for lost time. I was conflicted. On one hand, this gesture seemed genuine and heartfelt. On the other, I couldn't help but wonder if this was another attempt at manipulation. As I leafed through the notebook, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. Tucked in the back pages were several old photographs I had never seen before. They were pictures of our family in happier times, Mom and Dad looking young and in love, Kristen and me as toddlers. Seeing these snapshots of our past life hit me hard. It brought back a flood of emotions I thought I had dealt with long ago. I remember the day one of those photos was taken. It was at a family picnic in the local park. Dad had just taught me how to fly a kite, and we were all laughing as it soared in the sky. It was a perfect day, one of those memories that seem to glow in your mind. Dad explained that he had kept these photos with him all these years, a reminder of what he had left behind. He said he wanted me to have them now, along with a notebook. I left that meeting feeling more confused than ever. The Dad I saw that day seemed genuinely remorseful and eager to make amends. But could I trust this change? Was it fair to Mom and Kristen if I started to let him back into my life? I decided to take some time to process everything before making any decisions. I showed the notebook and photos to Mom and Kristen, seeking their perspectives. Mom was quiet as she looked through the mementos. I could see a mix of emotions play across her face, nostalgia, sadness, and a hint of anger. She finally said that while she appreciated Dad's efforts, she worried about him hurting us again. She shared a memory of her own, the night before Dad left, when they had stayed up all night talking, crying, and ultimately realizing their paths were diverging. Kristen, on the other hand, seemed more open to the idea of reconnecting with Dad. She said that while she couldn't forget the past, she was willing to give him a chance to be part of our lives again, albeit cautiously. She recalled a faint memory of Dad teaching her to tie her shoelaces, a small moment of connection that she had held onto all these years. As for me, I'm torn. The notebook and photos have stirred up feelings I thought were long buried. Part of me wants to believe that people can change and that it's never too late to try and make things right. But another part of me is scared of being hurt again. I'm considering allowing Dad to have a limited role in my life, perhaps regular dinners or family events. But I'm also aware that this decision doesn't just affect me. It impacts Mom, Kristen, and even Sophia. So, Reddit, I turn to you again for advice. Am I naive for considering giving Dad another chance? How do I balance my own conflicting feelings with the potential impact on my family? Any thoughts or similar experiences would be greatly appreciated. Update 3, I want to thank everyone for their continued support and advice throughout this complicated situation. Your insights have been invaluable in helping me navigate these choppy emotional waters. Here's the final update on how things have unfolded. After much soul-searching and many discussions with my family, I decided to give Dad a chance to be part of our lives again, but with clear boundaries. We agreed to monthly family dinners and occasional outings, always as a group. This way, we could slowly rebuild our relationship without putting too much pressure on anyone. The first few gatherings were awkward, to say the least. There was a lot of tension, particularly between Dad and Mom. But as time went on, things started to feel more natural. Dad made consistent efforts to engage with us, asking about our lives and sharing stories from his time abroad. During one of these dinners, Dad shared more about his life in Silicon Valley. He talked about the intense work culture, the constant pressure to innovate, and the cutthroat competition. He admitted that he had gotten caught up in the rat race, always chasing the next big thing, convinced that success was just around the corner. It was eye-opening to hear about the world he had chosen over us, and while it didn't excuse his actions, it helped me understand his mindset a little better. Kristen seemed to be warming up to Dad the most. They discovered a shared interest in photography, and Dad started teaching her some techniques he had picked up over the years. It was strange but heartwarming to see them bonding over something. Mom remained cautious but civil. She and Tom would join us for some of the family gatherings, and while it was clear she had moved on, she was willing to let Dad be a part of our lives for Kristen's and my sake. However, about 6 months into this new arrangement, something happened that forced me to reevaluate everything. I discovered that Dad had been less than truthful about his financial situation. It started with a chance encounter. I ran into one of Dad's old business associates at a tech conference I was attending for work. We got to talking, and he mentioned how surprised he was that Dad had gone off the grid given his successful investments. This caught me off guard, as it contradicted everything Dad had told us about his financial troubles. Digging deeper, I found out that while Dad had indeed faced some setbacks, he wasn't nearly as destitute as he had led us to believe. He still had significant assets hidden away in offshore accounts. When confronted, Dad initially tried to deny it. But faced with the evidence, he finally admitted the truth. He claimed he had exaggerated his financial troubles to create an opportunity to reconnect with us, believing we wouldn't have given him a chance otherwise. I was furious. All the progress we had made, all the trust we had cautiously extended, felt like it had been built on lies. It brought back all the old feelings of betrayal and abandonment. I called a family meeting to discuss this new development. Mom was angry but not surprised, saying she had always suspected there was more to the story. Kristen was deeply hurt, feeling like we had been manipulated all over again. After a long and emotional discussion, we came to a difficult decision. We told Dad that while we appreciated his efforts to reconnect, his dishonesty had irreparably damaged any trust we had begun to rebuild. We decided to cut ties with him once again. It wasn't an easy choice, but we felt it was necessary for our own emotional well-being. We realized that true reconciliation can't be built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. In the aftermath of this decision, I've had time to reflect on this whole experience. While it didn't end the way I had hoped, I don't regret giving Dad a chance. It provided closure in a way I hadn't expected. I now know that I tried my best to mend our relationship, and I can move forward without wondering what if. This experience has also brought my family closer together. Mom, Kristen, and I have had many deep conversations about our past, our feelings, and our hopes for the future. We've emerged stronger and more united than ever. As for me, I'm focusing on the family I have, my mom, my sister, my girlfriend Sophia, and my stepdad Tom. They've been my rock throughout this ordeal, reminding me of what true family love and support look like. I've learned that sometimes, the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. Moving forward, I'm committed to cherishing and nurturing these relationships that have proven to be constant and true. Thank you all once again for your support and advice throughout this journey. While it didn't have the happy ending I initially hoped for, I feel at peace with the outcome. I'm ready to close this chapter and look forward to the future, surrounded by the people who have shown me what unconditional love really means.